Joining us now for the interview is retired Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He was Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Powell in the lead up to the war in Iraq. Colonel Wilkerson, it's really good to have you here tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Do you see it as important that the brand new Bush Library is arguing the weight of the evidence that existed to invade Iraq? Is it important in the big picture, or does everybody just expect that a presidential library will all be propaganda?
I don't think so. I think, as you pointed out in your opening, this is a special kind of propaganda. This is Karl Rove propaganda. But let me point out to you how fast we rehabilitate things in America. You earlier on your show had Philip Mudd. Philip Mudd was the one standing behind me in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel at 2 a.m. in the morning, insisting I put items about terrorism back in Powell's presentation that I had thrown out, calling them garbage. In fact, he was so insistent that he went and ran and told George Tenet, and the next morning on the floor of the UN Security Council, George Tenet accosted me about what I'd done. So Phil Mudd is still around, still advising on terrorism and so forth. We rehabilitate people really fast.
You were involved in the preparation of Secretary Powell's presentation to the UN. You have described that kind of pressure before, although I will tell you I did not connect that to Phil Mudd and talking to him about a totally different subject tonight, and thank you for connecting those dots. Did you know when you were working on that presentation the specific thing about the mobile biological weapons labs guy, this curveball guy, that an American who had met with him said he was a liar who shouldn't be trusted? Do you guys have access to that information?
We didn't even know the term curveball. All we knew was that an Iraqi engineer, confirmed by other sources and methods of U.S. intelligence, had been working in one of the labs, according to the testimony, and had an explosion in that lab, and it had killed several people, and that he had given the CIA much information, which, as you'll note in the presentation, we turned into sketches of the actual rail-mounted and truck-mounted mobile labs. It was very specific, it was very detailed, and George Tenet stood behind it foursquare. We didn't know anything about Curveball, the B&D, the German intelligence equivalent of the CIA, or any of these other things, these revelations that have come out since. At the time, George Tenet confided none of that in us.
Colonel Wilkerson, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about that I did not realize until seeing this tape from the library today is that in this decision points thing they ask you to work through at the Bush Library, is their way of telling this history. You, as the sort of fake president, you can get advice from the CIA, from the Defense Department, from the UN, from Iraqi academics, but there's no option programmed into the game to get advice from the State Department. Even as President Bush says first, we tried diplomacy first. I wondered if you feel like that actually reflects the decision-making in the months leading up to the war. How heavily was the State Department consulted?
It certainly does reflect the State Department. It reflects the State Department's power in the U.S. government to this day. Diplomacy is the least used and the least honed instrument in our arsenal. And the reason for that is long-standing. It starts with Dick Nixon and others who have derided the State Department as the home of pinko communist dogs. I mean, that's the way the State Department was looked at by the Bush administration also. They tolerated Colin Powell because Colin Powell had poll ratings like Mother Teresa. They couldn't very well not tolerate Colin Powell. But the State Department was looked on as a filthy, dirty place where people worked who were not competent and had no advice to offer that was worth a damn.
Do you feel like when you're looking right now at the debates about Syria, the debates about Iran, the debates about other national security challenges for our country around the world and how we're going to deal with them, do you feel like there is a real concrete effect of propagating a whitewashed history of what we went through with the Iraq War? Does that affect the debates that we're having now on issues like Iran and Syria?
Oh, I think so. I think, as Yogi Berra, I think it was, once said, it's like deja vu all over again. I see us walking down the same road with the same characters singing in the choir, the same people off the same sheet of music with a few changes, trying to get us into war with Iran. The new momentum with respect to Syria is not just because of the brutal civil war there. It's also because people like Lindsey Graham and John McCain from my party and Bob Menendez from the Democratic Party would like to use Syria as a backdoor to get us into war with Iran. This is another catastrophe brewing, and if the American people don't wake up and start saying something about it, they're going to find themselves in another $1 trillion 10-year war that's going to produce the results not unlike those in Iraq today. And let me just say, Iraq is a mess today. It is an absolute mess. You've got the Saudis funding the Sunnis in a resurgence of the civil war. You've got Maliki in the back pocket of Iran. So what we have, as George Bush doesn't tell you in his library, is an ally of Iran in Iraq now. You got the Kurds about to establish their own state in the north, and Iraqis who know anything about their country predicting it'll break up in the next 4 to 5 years. So that's what George Bush did for Iraq.
The end of the game involves when he says they do the status of Iraq now, and they talk about Iraq being an ally, a strong ally on defense and economic and all sorts of security issues for the United States. It's amazing stuff. Retired Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, served former Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell and the lead up to the Iraq War. Thank you for making the connection with our earlier guest tonight. That was stunning, and now I have to get you guys in the same room to talk to me at the same time. That's going to be a great night.
Anytime.
Thank you, Colonel. All right, we'll be right back.
Turned 65 last week. The math of retirement is different.